Our next speaker is Arkaitz Zubiaga for Queen Mary University London, who's going to talk about early detection of social media hoaxes. And this is a replacement for Rebecca Tromble's talk, who wasn't able to come, but it's very interesting work, so thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, as you can see, I'm not Rebecca. I'm Arkaitz Zubiaga. I'm a lecturer at Queen Mary University London. In the last few years, I've been working within computer science. I'm in the School of Computer Science. Within the last few years, I've been working in trying and building tools for assisting with news gathering in social media, so assisting journalists with news gathering. And one of the big challenges that this involves is dealing with misinformation and all the related phenomena around this. So today I'm going to talk about some project that I have around this topic, and particularly hoaxes and how hoaxes spread in social media, and what we can do to detect them. So there's actually quite a few things here, most of which I've been working on and doing different things, but it's important to see that the concepts are quite different. So there's things like fact-checking, where you actually need to somehow validate or check claims by politicians or some public figures, like saying investment in education has gone down or up or something. But there's also other problems which are very different, like rumor detection or detecting hoaxes. And we can see, for instance, the rumor detection, if we understand the problem as in the context of breaking news, that we have very quickly evolving news stories and reports around news, and often we don't have any other sources to look at, while fact-checking generally involves checking some claims against databases and things like that. So I think it's important to mention that there are quite a few different things here. Also, we have a bunch of terms to refer to inaccurate information, or however you want to classify all of these concepts. But yeah, like disinformation, misinformation, bogus, propaganda, and an endless list. And I have a rhetorical question here, and it's, do we really need a new word for this? So a lot of people have started using a new word to refer to this. I know this is a controversial question. There can be, I'm sure there are people with different opinions here, and we probably have three clusters here of people who wouldn't like to see it, people who do really like it, and people who don't care. But yeah, so my point is here, I think this term that you can see there, it's not an accurate one, at least for science, that has a specific definition for a concept within the problem of misinformation. So I think it's, at least it needs a good definition whenever we use it, and it's often problematic otherwise. So, well, for this talk I'm going to focus on hoax detection, which is something that, at least within the academic context, has been not very often studied, perhaps because of the difficulty in tackling the problem and getting the data, which I'll be touching upon in this talk. And particularly one of the limitations that we have in academic research in general, whenever we do computer science and automated methods, is the lack of data. We do have problems to access data, but we have limitations to access data. It's easy to get data. We can get a lot of data from social media, different platforms, but we do need labels, right? We do need to know whether stories are true or false, so we can then build automated tools on top of that. And within the context of early hoaxes, so there was the problem also that I was looking at, that we don't have like a whole timeline of reports around hoaxes. There wasn't a data set when I checked it, so it's difficult to study this concept, how it evolves over time. And here, so I'm going to touch upon particularly celebrity death hoaxes, which is one of the big issues in social media, that people start saying that somebody has died, usually a celebrity, and since there are no more sources, many people just share it, and this becomes viral, and many people believe it, and in some cases even news organizations have picked it up and reported about it. So it becomes even worse. So here we can see an example of Instagram where somebody said that Sylvester Stallone had died. because of cancer. So certainly this wasn't true, but it had quite a lot of discussion around it in the comments. And yeah, it can go viral and it can go. In order to tackle this, I was thinking of how we can actually scale this on a larger scale, and how we could actually analyze social media hoaxes in a larger scale. And well, particularly focusing on the celebrity death hoaxes, we do have at least a keyword that is very often used within this context, which is RIP, R-I-P. So, well, we started with this collection of data, at least within this, around this keyword, collecting mentions of the keyword RIP, and then looking for potential mentions of celebrities around it. And the good thing of this is that we have large resources, knowledge bases like Wiki Data, that we can use to find names of people. Wiki Data is a very large resource created alongside Wikipedia, which has a very long list of people and other entities, and we can get information about people and their aliases, when they were born, and whether they are dead or not, when they died. So this is very easy to use this post hoc to verify whether some reports in social media are actually true or not. It matches what we see in Wiki Data. So this is where we actually get from Wiki Data as the official, well, the structure of the code that we get. So it gives us some useful information, including the birth and the death of a person, also aliases, as I was mentioning. And, well, you can see also it gives us a value, which is the precision, but this is just for people, contemporary people is always like a precise date. For people who lived in the 15th century, we have a less precision, like we only know the month when they died. But this is not a problem for our case, where we're looking at hoaxes for contemporary people. But yeah, so this is a very good gold standard for us to check if a person has actually died. And we can look at the name, we can look at the aliases, and we can check whether the death date matches that it is reported in social media. So it's quite easy to build a data set out of that, to go and study. So in order to do this in this project, I looked at keywords. As I said, we could do that easily over a long period of time, and then obviously doing some cleaning of the data, because when you collect RIP, you have lowercase occurrences of RIP, which can refer to the verb in English or something else. So we removed those, and we looked at only the cases that had RIP followed by a person's name. And we sampled also to have cases of just a single mention, in order to also have reasonably sized samples. And yeah, so then the labeling is semi-automated. It's quite easy because we have, as I said, Wiki Data, and it's quite straightforward to just go from the names that we have found in the tweets and then see if it matches the data we have in Wiki Data. And this often can be done automatically. So whenever one person appears in Wiki Data, this name is not ambiguous, so you don't have to check which of the persons it refers to. And the date matches, so this is just an accurate case, and we can just automatically label it. So there are just a few cases that you need to manually check and validate. It's quite straightforward. And this helped us to collect at least a large data set of, millions, we did it from Twitter in this case, for millions of tweets associated with 4,000 death reports over the course of 3 years, of which around 15%, 600, were actually death hoaxes. So almost one a day that we observe on Twitter are death hoaxes that become viral to some extent. We did some preliminary analysis just looking at to what extent we would be able to predict and how early we would be able to do it, having this data for training and developing our host detection system. And well, as you can see over time, this is if we did the prediction in the second 0 or in the second 900, that's the end, as the trend evolves, so as there's more information about it as the time passes. And as you can see, it improves over time, but we still have a significant room for improvement here, and it's certainly a challenging thing. What's good is when we look at least at the different categories that we have in our data set, we were looking at hoaxes, real deaths, and commemorations, when they are referring to older deaths of previous years, which are also real. So we see that actually, for hoaxes, it's quite easy to identify them, especially as time goes on. So we can identify 87% of the hoaxes after 5 minutes. So that's reasonably good, and it can actually help out for journalists or whoever is looking at these stories and trying to verify. Certainly, that's not the final answer. You need to still call up the family or something, but it can help. And so some fun stories that I observed from the dataset. There's a lot of cases. Well, Justin Bieber has been killed off like I don't know how many times, but and it goes viral again and again. So and fans are really always wondering whether it's true or not. So and somebody starts spreading this, and then later, a couple of hours later, they say, "Oh, I was just joking. Actually, by RIP, I meant really inspiring person." Cool. So they're just making fun, and you see. So, but it goes viral, so the problem is still there. Likewise, other cases, Messi also has been killed off a number of times, and then they were just saying that he has missed the penalty and he's dead. But it's not actually died. But the problem is, okay, this is easy if you know the context, but it often goes to the list of trending topics, or it comes up in your timeline and you don't know why, and did this person really die? So, yeah, it's interesting to look at these particular cases. Also, there's quite a lot of cases where we have fake accounts, where somebody uses either an underscore or different letters like a 0 instead of a no to manipulate accounts, Twitter accounts. So I think it's also very important here that we go back and track down the original source whenever we can, so we can actually explore who started our story, so that we can validate whether it's reliable or not. So a big question for this is, how is this useful? How this tool, because it's not 100% accurate. I mean, it's performing relatively well, but so I think here we have different objectives. One is from the academic side of the things, is we want to understand how hoaxes start, how hoaxes are spread, so we can understand the phenomenon better. And then we can perhaps apply it to other kinds of misinformation cases. But we still think it can be useful for assisting fact-checkers. They can, at least, if we can give them some context into why we think something is false or is true for our classifier, it can help out. And we can also help by flagging or filtering out or holding off presenting information to users or showing them in the list of trending topics. So, yeah, this depends on the policy of the particular system or how you want to tackle these cases, but it can definitely help in stopping disinformation from spreading early on. The data is there, and we're also obviously always looking for more data. This is not enough still for us. We have a reasonably large data set and a good one, but still we only have celebrity death hoaxes, and this is obviously doesn't generalize to other kinds of hoaxes and doesn't generalize to other kinds of misinformation, certainly. So I think here we have built a reasonably good approach, and this is what we're trying to do here, is to try and build systems to detect misinformation at scale, build data set for that, to do the automation, and to get some insights also. We want to do both the automation and also the understanding of the phenomenon from an academic perspective. As I was saying, we need a lot of more work still, so we have to generalize it. This is a very specific data set, including celebrity death hoaxes, only from Twitter, and so we definitely need to expand this in many aspects. We need to do more data analysis in order to understand that, and also another limitation is that we're only looking at texts in English, so we do need to look at or the languages in order to generalize, which is also a big issue. And here, well, we need to, as has been mentioned many times during this conference, but we need to collaborate with not-for-profit organizations, with companies who have, each of them have different resources. In academia, we don't have a user base who can flag information for us, so we have to somehow resort to more automated or semi-automated means that are easier for us to use for scaling. So yeah, but I'm happy to chat further on this, and happy to take questions.
Hi. Can you generalize a little bit on the generalization to other hoaxes? Like, in particular, I'm interested in what you can reuse from, death hoaxes, in generalization.
I think you can reuse especially the patterns of how it starts off and how it spreads. So looking at these kind of patterns and understanding why people start these kind of hoaxes, how others pick it up and share it, and yeah, maybe, I mean, with more data and more analysis, we can observe that these patterns are different from other kinds of more normal, more, well, good news. I mean, not good, but good real news. So for the automation, I think it's more limited, because I don't think we can really, unless we have more on these patterns, I don't think we can really do too much from here to automation in other kinds of hoaxes or other kinds of misinformation. That's perhaps more difficult because the vocabulary will be different, and I think it would be harder to generalize in that aspect. But the main goal here, I think, is to start by learning the patterns, identifying some patterns, and then see if we can either get more data or try and expand those patterns to other cases.
Thank you.
Yes, it says that lady.
Okay. Yesterday, thank you. Thanks for the talk, Arkaitz. Yesterday there was a talk from Leon. He looked at the stance, so the comments towards the beginning of the message. Did you look at the comments in terms of stance, how they react to the first message? Did they say, no, he's not dead, he's alive?
No, not really in this case. That's a good point, and it could potentially help, especially as time goes on. So in the very first messages, perhaps you don't have much diversity, but then this begins to perhaps change as people are more skeptical or people start sharing about countering the particular hoaxes. So yeah, I think that would be useful. So what I presented here, especially in terms of experiments, is very preliminary, and certainly there's quite a lot to incorporate there, both by looking at the patterns, as I was saying, also looking at more closely at the content, looking at the stance, and looking at also who is saying what. And
thank you.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for any more questions, but yeah, feel free to grab Arkaitz later. So let's thank Arkaitz once again.